Welcome. It's your host Tino, and welcome to Tino's Time. And on this episode, we're going to recap Week 3 of the NFL fantasy football season, and then we're going to preview Week 4 and get you ready to set your lineups so we could either make sure you start 4-0 or get that first win. Maybe you're still looking for a first win, or maybe you're just looking to go 3-1 and get right up there and keep going. And let's not waste any time, and let's get into the fantasy headlines. Who remembers Josh Gordon? Remember Josh Gordon? He was on the Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots. Well, he's back in the NFL, guys. He got reinstated, and he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs practice squad. So watch out for Josh Gordon, and in my opinion, I would not go out and get him just yet. But we'll talk about him a little bit later. Two running backs that you need to must add right now. Chuba Hubbard and Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison scored 23.1 points this week, and Chuba Herbert is the backup for Christian McCaffrey, C-Mac, and he will be out for at least 6 weeks. He will not be put on IR, but you need a replacement for C-Mac, and if you drafted him first overall, you need to go get his backup ASAP. And for the last fantasy recap, Week 4 is going to be awesome. It's the return. It's Brady versus Belichick on Sunday night. Brady's going back to New England. We're going to get into that game a little bit later, but it's time for the return of the GOAT. But before we talk about the GOAT, let's get into all the injuries that happened this week in Week 3 of the NFL fantasy football season. The quarterback that got hurt, Justin Fields, he hurt his hand during the blowout loss to the Cleveland Browns. He said it's okay, but Matt Nagy said he doesn't know who's going to be the starter. So I would just monitor that, and it's more of the fact because of David Montgomery and Allen Robinson and stuff like that. And obviously you're going to start D-Mont, but Allen Robinson is one of those guys that, it sucks because he didn't only had 2 catches this past week. And then with Andy Dalton and Nick Foles, he seems to do a little bit better. But I'm not telling you to sit Allen Robinson. Just watch out and monitor who's going to be the quarterback for the Chicago Bears this upcoming week versus the Detroit Lions. The running backs, James White, left the game with a hip injury, and he will probably be out for a little bit. Christian McCaffrey, we talked about it. He hurt his hamstring last week on Thursday night. And it looks like he's going to be out, like I said earlier, 6 weeks. But the good news is he will not be having to go on the IR. So that is always good news. And so, like I said, if you have Christian McCaffrey, go get Chuba Herbert now. Hubbard. Go get him now. Wide receivers, A.J. Brown has a hamstring injury. He's week to week. Just monitor if he practices or not. But everybody knows, especially if you're a baseball fan, these hamstrings linger. And it's one of those things, it's so hard to know if they're going to play. And it's one of those things that it could get re-injured during the game. And it's, especially in fantasy, you don't want guys that are going to be hurt or going in, because these hamstring injuries also happened to the Giants receivers. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton both left the game with hamstring injuries, and neither one of them returned. And with A.J. Brown, it's one of those things you have to watch, because hamstrings can linger, and we just, we don't want to have those guys on our teams that have lingering injuries, because even if they do start, they probably will be on a pitch count, and we don't want that. The last receiver that got hurt this past week was Juju Smith-Schuster. He hurt his ribs. Hopefully he is okay. He said he is okay. We'll have to keep an eye on him. And to be honest, in my opinion, I really wouldn't be starting Juju unless you are really, really desperate. There are so many deep wide receivers out there that you can go and get, that, you don't need Juju. And especially with the Packers coming up this week, I think that defense is definitely going to do good versus Ben Roethlisberger, because Ben Roethlisberger is just not that guy anymore. But let's talk about who is the guy. On Monday Night Football, the Dallas Cowboys dominated the Eagles 41-21. I thought this game was going to be fantasy gold. I thought this game was going to be a shootout, but Dallas dominated, and, Dak Prescott put up 238 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have 1 fumble loss, but he finished still with 30 points. And Zeke, he had himself a day. He had 95 yards and 2 touchdowns and had 21 plus points. And Zeke finally proved why, or he finally showed why he should be that number 3 or 4th overall pick. Hopefully he can continue this upcoming week, because Zeke, we need you. And then Dalton Schultz, humble brag time for your boy Tino. I told you to start him last week on my show, and he had 6 receptions, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Dak and Schultz seem like they got a connection. So if you're in a deeper league, a 12-man, 10-man, or if you're in an 8-man and you need a tight end, go pick up Dalton Schultz, because it seems like him and Dak are working good together. But on the other side of the ball, Jalen Hurts just could not get anything going at all. I don't know if you guys have, on Monday night, they do the Monday night with Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, and so I decided to watch that broadcast because I was just curious on how they did it, how exactly everything worked, and it wasn't bad, and I thought it was really cool. They had Matthew Stafford, they had LeBron James, they had Chris Long, they had all these guys come out, they had Nick Saban they talked to, and that's kind of a different, interesting way to watch Monday Night Football, so I would definitely recommend it. They will not be back now until Week 7, but Week 7, when they do come back with the Manning brothers, definitely give it a try, even if it's for a half, because it's interesting, and Peyton Manning and Eli, even though Eli was only good for beating the New England Patriots and saving Tom Brady from having 10 Super Bowl rings, Eli was still great, and Peyton Manning's one of the best. But before I get too far ahead of myself with the Eli brothers, or not the Eli brothers, the Manning brothers, let's talk about the Eagles real quick. Jalen Hurts had 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's one of the things, he did put up a lot of points, and that's good, but it was in a lot of garbage time, and garbage time still counts, and we always talk about that, but there's not always going to be that opportunity for him to get the garbage time that he needs. But if it is there, there's going to be better matchups down the road, and I think Jalen Hurts will be fine. The Cowboys were just playing their game. This is the first game back for Dak in his hometown, in Jerry's world, since his horrible injury last year. So maybe that was part of it. And I think, like I said, you're not going to sit Jalen Hurts. You're obviously going to play the matchups with him. But it's still good that he put up 30 points, especially because they got dominated. But did we see the return of Zach Ertz, guys? He had 4 receptions, 53 yards, and 1 touchdown. Zach Ertz has been invisible for the last couple of years. Zach Ertz was a top 5 tight end a few years ago, but he returned on Monday night, and maybe he's the guy you can go out and grab, especially if you need a tight end. If you're in a 2 tight end league, I definitely would, because if Jalen Hurts looks his way, Dallas Goedert also had a really good game. He had about 6 receptions, 80 yards, and right around there. But hey, if Jalen Hurts is looking for the tight ends, I'll take it. And hey, Zach Ertz, welcome back to fantasy football, right? But on the downside for the Eagles, Miles Sanders only had 27 yards, and Devonte Smith only had 3 receptions for 28 yards. And, like I talked about, Jalen Hurts got a lot of yards, he got a lot of points, but Sanders and Smith were 2 guys that I really thought were going to do better in this game, and they just didn't. So I'm sorry if I told you to start Devonte Smith last week. I really thought this was going to be a better matchup, and I thought he was going to break out. But it just didn't happen. And it's one of those things with Devonte Smith. I don't want to get too overreacted with him. But if this continues, I don't know if I can continue to put him in my lineup, because I can't keep having these goose eggs versus all these teams. I need to find a flex that is consistent. In my case, that's who I have as a flex. I don't know if you guys have him as a wide receiver 2 or 3. Or maybe he is your flex. I would just keep seeing what happens, but I would definitely, if you have a better option on your bench, or I'll give you a couple waiver wire wide receivers that you go pick up if you need help because you were struggling with Devonte Smith. I almost said Devonta Adams, but Devonta Adams had a really good game, even though he got his head kicked off. But we'll talk about Devonta in a little bit. Before we talk about all the studs of the week, though, let's talk about all the guys that cost us our week and that were just straight up disappointments, and they were just not good. And should we start worrying about these guys? First, let's start off with the tight ends. Kyle Pitts only had 5.5 points. TJ Hawkinson only had 3 points, and Robert Tanyan only had 1.6 points. Those 3 tight ends were they were in the top 10 tight ends that everybody drafted this year, especially Pitts, because everybody thought this Falcons offense was going to be down and they were scoring, but Matt Ryan for some reason just doesn't seem to know not how to throw interceptions, and yeah, so that is a big reason on why the Falcons are just struggling. Maybe Julio was right and the Falcons are just a disaster, but what are you going to do? Sit Kyle Pitts? Tight ends are so hard to come by. I'll give you some tight ends in a little bit that you could think about picking up and maybe starting over Kyle Pitts. But like TJ Hawkinson, you're obviously not going to sit him, especially with a matchup versus the Bears this week. I love my Chicago Bears, but they've just played awful, and the Cleveland Browns made them look like booty on Sunday. So I would definitely keep TJ Hawkinson in your lineup. Also, Robert Tanyan, we just said it. He's another one. You can't sit these guys because tight ends are so hard to come by. And like I said, I'm going to give you a few in a little bit, but it's just so hard to sit these tight ends because they're so touchdown dependable, and there's not many out there that you can trust unless you got Kittle, Waller, or Kelsey, however you want to say his name now. But it's just one of those things, yeah. Also, the receivers, though. Allen Robinson only had 4.7 points. I just mentioned it with TJ Hawkinson, how the Bears played like booty, and Allen Robinson played even bootier, and it was not good. The Bears' offense looked like shit, and it just was not good. I think they definitely will do better versus the Lions because, as you know, the Lions lost their cornerbacks. They don't have a very good secondary, so I think the Bears will do definitely better this week. And I definitely not telling you to sit Allen Robinson. Keep him in your lineup because I think he'll be fine, even though who his quarterback is. I mean, he's had Mitch Trubisky, he's had Nick Foles, he's had Andy Dalton, he's had Justin Fields, he's had all these guys. So I think he'll be fine, whoever the quarterback is. I think it was just the Browns' defense was really good, and they're even better than we thought they were. But a guy that I am worried about, and a guy that you should honestly think about dropping for somebody that you could go pick up that might be better. Robbie Anderson only had 1 catch, and he had 1.8 points. And that just ain't going to do it. It doesn't seem like Sam Darnold's looking his way. It looks like he's looking more Terrence Marshall Jr.'s way. He's looking towards DJ Moore. He's not looking towards Robbie Anderson. And maybe it's because Robbie Anderson reminds him of the Jets, and he just doesn't want to remember the Jets. So, I mean, in my opinion, I would just drop Robbie Anderson and pick up somebody better. But you know, he has had 11 targets this season, and it's one of those things that, you know, maybe he'll get going, but I can't trust Robbie Anderson. Robert Woods had 6.3 points. He's another guy, though, I'm not so worried about because he has Matthew Stafford, and Matthew Stafford looks like he's playing like Patrick Mahomes on the Rams, and that offense is so deadly. Cooper Kupp put up another phenomenal number that we'll get into when we talk about the studs of Sunday. And yeah, I think Robert Woods is another guy who'll be fine. We talked about Devonte Smith. He only had 5.8 points. And like I said, if there's somebody out there better, then I would start him. If you could find somebody on your bench, just until he can prove to me that he could have a huge game, then I don't think that I can trust him right now. Sterling Shepard only had 3.6 points. We talked about him. He left because of a hamstring injury. And to be honest, he's one of those guys, I just don't trust the Giants receivers. So honestly, I'm staying away, and I have him in one of my leagues, and I will be dropping him for somebody better. Rondelle Moore, though, people. Rondelle Moore was a top 5 waiver wire pickup. People spent some of their fab money. People went out and got this guy because they thought he was going to go out, and he only had 2.4 points, and in some leagues I saw he had negative 0.5 because it was not a PPR league or whatever it is. I don't know why people aren't playing in PPR leagues anymore. They should be, but that's just my opinion. But Rondelle Moore only had 2.4 points, like I said, and it's one of those things that there's just too many mouths to feed in Arizona, and hopefully DeAndre Hopkins is okay. He didn't seem to do very good. He was another one that was a very bad disappointment this week. He only had 5 points, and hopefully he can come back this week and have a good game. But that's somebody to watch is DeAndre. Make sure that he is healthy this week because he was active, but like we said, he just did not have a good opponent, and he just did not have a good game at all. But Rondelle Moore is somebody, again, that you can maybe drop, and I'll give you some other waiver wire receivers that you can get in a little bit. Tyreek Hill had a game under 10 points. Patrick Mahomes didn't have that great of a game. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are in last place for the first time since 2005, people. That is ridiculous. They are like the Kansas City, they are like the New England Patriots now. They are like the Yankees. It's ridiculous. This is the first time in a long time. So, obviously, what are you going to do? Sit Tyreek Hill? You probably drafted him in the first or second round. Don't sit Tyreek Hill. He's going to be fine because I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs are going to come out this week and they're going to ball out. So you're obviously going to start Tyreek Hill. Don't be stupid and don't sit him. Also, another guy that you're not going to sit is Jonathan Taylor. You drafted him in the first or second round. He has only had 8.2 points, and he is the 35th running back overall in the fantasy football season this year. But he's due for a breakout game. And to be honest, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. And I think this is the game that he's going to break out and he's going to get that first touchdown of the season. So don't you worry about Jonathan Taylor. He'll be fine. A guy that I'm worried about, though, Mike Davis, I would drop him, to be honest. He's not doing very good. He only had he's 26th overall in running backs this season. Cordell Patterson is getting more opportunities. So in my opinion, I would definitely just drop Mike Davis. And I just don't want to deal with that. The running backs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they combined for 7.5 points. That's just not good. And to be honest, Giovanni Bernard is somebody I would definitely go out and consider picking up too, because he is really good, and it seemed like he got a lot of the checkdowns from Brady. And hey, if you're in a PPR league, every time he checks it down, that's a point right there, and I'll take that all day long. Another guy, this was a my bad. We'll get into my bads a little bit, but Tyson Williams, people, the last 2 weeks he was doing good. He was getting opportunities. He got a couple touchdowns. We were feeling good. And then this week he was going to go face the Lions after Aaron Jones put up a demolishing game and had 4 touchdowns versus them. We were like, heck yeah, Tyson Williams is going to put up a flex number. We're going to be able to feel good and put up numbers. And this man puts up 2.2 points. Are you serious, my guy? What the hell? Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray from 2012. I almost said 1912. I don't know what I'm thinking about. But you're telling me that those two got more points than you? Come on. Tyson Williams, you did absolutely nothing for us. Thanks a lot for costing me one of my weeks. Nick Chubb had 8.4 points. And I'm not going to worry about Nick Chubb, though. He and Kareem Hunt seem to do this. It was just a Kareem Hunt kind of day, and the Chicago Bears defense just let Kareem Hunt run up and down the field. So I'm not worried about him. So, yeah, don't sit Nick Chubb. The last running back and the last disappointment of the week is Damian Harris. He had 3.1 points this week for the New England Patriots. And even though James White, he did get hurt also in this past week. And like we did talk about James White. So, obviously Damian Harris is going to be having a lot more opportunities with James White being out. So I would definitely consider starting Damian Harris and keep him in your lineup, because the New England Patriots have some good matchups in the upcoming weeks. So keep him in your lineup, and hopefully James White is okay, but that will definitely help Harris's production throughout the upcoming weeks. But enough about the disappointments. Let's talk about the studs. Let's talk about all the guys that helps you to get to 3-0, 2-1. Maybe they helped you get your first win of the season. And we're not going to go in any particular order. We're just going to read off these 10 names, and we're just going to do a little thing and celebrate these guys that helped us win. The first guy is Josh Allen. He had 358 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also had 1 rushing touchdown, and he had 52.38 points. That's phenomenal. Thank you, Josh Allen, for showing why you were worth drafting and why you are one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the NFL today. I mentioned this man. This man got hit in the head late in the third quarter, and I didn't think he was going to come back. But Devonta Adams, throughout this whole entire game on Sunday night versus the San Francisco 49ers, balled out. He had 12 receptions, 132 yards, 1 touchdown, and he finished with 31.2 points, even though after he get knocked out in the head, helmet to helmet, after no penalty call. Devonta Adams is a beast, and he said he's made for this. Devonta Adams was definitely worth that second round pick. Justin Herbert, though, people, he was one of the guys that I told you about in draft preview, and in the first couple of weeks, he was somebody to watch, and he is proving week by week that he is here to stay in the NFL and that he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback and a great quarterback in the NFL in general. He had 281 yards, 4 touchdowns, 16 yards rushing, and he completed a 2-point conversion. He finished with 44.48 points, and Justin Herbert was probably your second quarterback that you drafted in your backup. So, I would definitely consider starting Justin Herbert over guys like Matt Ryan and guys that are struggling. If hopefully you were able to get Justin Herbert. Hopefully you didn't wait too long. I was able to in one of my leagues. I have Justin Herbert and Aaron Rodgers. Sorry, I'm giving a little bit of a humble brag to myself. Got 2 good quarterbacks, but I just have that. I don't know what to do, but I just might have to consider starting Justin Herbert. Another quarterback that's been phenomenal all season. Matthew Stafford. Oh my God. I need to go back to Matthew Stafford. We're going to go to Najee Harris real quick, but we'll go back to Matthew Stafford. Najee Harris had 40 yards rushing, but the great Ben Roethlisberger loves to check it down, and he had 14 receptions, 102 yards, and he finished with 28.2 points. Thank you, Najee, and thank you for coming out. Patrick Mahomes, even though he didn't have a great game, he still put on a show, and he got over 300 yards. He got 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but he finished with 36.1 points, and I'll take that all day long. We're going to get to Matthew Stafford in a minute, but let's talk about his wide receiver. His wide receiver had 9 receptions, 96 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 30.6 points. Cooper Kupp has become one of the best tight end, or one of the best receivers. I don't know why I'm saying Cooper Kupp is a tight end. Oh my God. Cooper Kupp is one of the best receivers that has come in the NFL this season, and I am so happy to have Cooper Kupp in the NFL and in fantasy football, because after last year and I drafted him, I stayed away from him, but obviously that was not the smart thing to do because I would love to have him on my team right now. But a guy that I sat this week and he finally, of course he goes off, James Robinson. He had 88 yards, 1 touchdown, 25.4 points. And that's not great, but for what James Robinson was, you probably drafted him in the 5th round. James Robinson putting up those numbers. Hopefully he can be more consistent as the weeks go on, but it's one of those things that we'll just have to see. And I would sell high on James Robinson, but that's just me because I don't know if I can trust him at all. So James Robinson, I'm going to try to trade you. Mike Williams, though, people. Mike Williams has been so consistent. He's put up 20-plus points every single game this season. And it's one of those things that Mike Williams, if you've known throughout the past season, he hasn't been as consistent as he's been this season. And finally, I think you can trust this man every single week. I think you can finally trust that you can start Mike Williams every single week, and he's going to do his thing. But let's get back to Matthew Stafford, because I accidentally wrote down the wrong numbers, and I don't want to give you the wrong numbers. But Matthew Stafford had himself a game. He had 343 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he finished with 44.38 points. Matthew Stafford put on an absolute show. And if you have Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, and they are putting up 70-plus points a game, that is phenomenal, people. Oh, my God. Who would have thought when we started the season that Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp would be doing that? I guess those breakfasts, they have breakfast every morning. I guess that works. Maybe I need to find somebody to have breakfast with so I could have that type of connection with them. But, they're doing great things. So if you're able to, hopefully you're celebrating probably being 3-0 because they're putting up big numbers. The last stud of the week, though, is Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill only had 197 yards, but he had 3 touchdowns, and, he did throw 2 interceptions, but he did finish with 33.42 points. So, in my opinion, Ryan Tannehill is one of those guys, especially this week. We're going to talk about him a little bit later on in my starts and sits and streams, that you definitely need to consider starting this week because he's facing the Jets, and that Jets defense is awful. If you had any of those studs of the week, congratulations, because you probably won. But now, it's time to do a little bit of a humble brag and my bad. And let's start off with the my bad, because the my bads were bad. I told you to sit Antonio Gibson and Matthew Stafford last week. I also thought that Bucks and Rams game was going to be low scoring, and of course that's not what it was, because we just talked about Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and they just put up phenomenal numbers. So hopefully you didn't listen to your boy Tino on this one and you started Matthew Stafford. Obviously you're not going to sit Cooper Kupp right now because he's just too hot, but I'm sorry if you sat Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, or Matthew Stafford like I told you to, because that just was not right to do. So, my bad, I'm sorry. I told you also to stream Danny Dimes, and Rondelle Moore, like we talked about in the disappointments, just gave you a complete goose egg. And that is one of the most disappointing things, because like we talked about it, I really thought that they were going to do, and they were going to have a really good game, but they just did not. And Danny Dimes just... I like Danny Dimes, but I don't know if I can trust him right now. There's better quarterbacks out there. You go get Joe Burrow. He's facing the Jags this week. He's in one of my streams and starts this week. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I just don't know if I can trust Danny Dimes. And Rondelle Moore is somebody I don't know if I can trust. I'd rather have Christian Kirk on that team. Maybe go out and get AJ Green. I almost said AJ Brown. AJ Green, the guy that was on the Bengals. Yes, AJ Green. Go out and get AJ Green. Listen to Kimmy Checks on Fantasy Live NFL Network every day at 4 or 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. She told you to go pick up AJ Green, so go do it. And so there's my bad. But let's get into a little bit of a humble brag for your boy Tino. I told you to start Dalton Schultz, and as we talked about it earlier on the Monday night game, he had 2 touchdowns. So hopefully you listen to me, because I told you to start the Dallas Cowboys tight ends on Monday night, and hopefully Dalton will help you win your week. Also, I told you to stream Sam Darnold, and on Thursday night, he put up a phenomenal performance, and he put up 28 points. So hopefully if you listen to me about those 2 things, hopefully those helped you win your week. I'm sorry if those 3 things you listened to me about did not help you win your week. I can't get everything right, people. I do my best every single week. But let's get into the 3 things that I learned this week. The 3 things that I learned this week is Brandon Cooks has been putting up 20.6 points per game, and he is the 6th overall receiver in the NFL this season. And he has become to the point where he is so quarterback proof, no matter if it's Davis Mills, if it's Tyrod Taylor, if it's Deshaun Watson ever again. You need to start Brandon Cooks every single week, because like we talked about, he is the 6th wide receiver. He is doing great things this season, and if you were lucky enough to get Brandon Cooks, you're probably benefiting a lot. Also, the receiver, Big Mike Williams, he put up 33.2 points this week, and him and Justin Herbert have just some type of connection, and this season he has been putting up 20 plus points this whole entire season, and it's one of those things that if you're able to get Mike Williams late in the draft, he's also probably benefiting you a lot, like Brandon Cooks. Also, you can start the teams versus the Chiefs defense. The Chiefs defense just is not what it used to be a few years ago. The Chiefs defense is giving up 31.7 offensive yards and offensive fantasy points to their quarterback, to the receivers, the running backs, just everybody. So if you're worried about not starting teams and starting players versus the Chiefs defense, don't you worry. So you need to just make sure that the Chiefs just aren't what they once were. And that's okay, because teams change, and yeah. So you could start teams versus the Chiefs. You could start players versus the Chiefs. The last thing I learned this week is Urban Meyer hates us. And I don't know what to do about this, because James Robinson had 8 points and 9 points the last 2 weeks. And then this week, all of a sudden, he goes out and balls out versus the Arizona Cardinals. And yes, it's only 25 points. And yes, the Cardinals' run defense isn't that great. But James Robinson being so up and down and consistent, again, I told you a little bit earlier, I would definitely sell high on him, because it's one of those things that if you can go out and get a good receiver that you need, or a tight end maybe, if you could just, if you need a good flex and you want to trade him and you have running back depth, I would definitely think about it, because if he's going to be so inconsistent this year, and Carlos Hyde was still also playing in that game, so I just don't know if I can trust James Robinson for the entire season. And I hate to say that, because to be honest, he was the man last year that helped me win not help me win my league, but he helped me get into the playoffs and definitely get a lot farther than I thought. But I just don't think that Urban Meyer likes us. So maybe Urban Meyer hates us. And those are 3 things that I learned from week 3. And now let's talk about let's get ready for week 4. Week 4 is going to be a great week in fantasy football and in the NFL in general. Week 4 has some phenomenal games. We talked about it a little bit earlier. The GOAT, the Patriots versus the Buccaneers. Tom Brady is returning to Belichick and New England. He's returning to Gillette Stadium. It's going to be one of those things on Sunday Night Football that is going to be phenomenal. And I just cannot wait to see what happens with Brady and Belichick and see what happens. But my bold prediction, we're going to talk about bold predictions for week 4 now. My first bold prediction for week 4 is the Patriots shut up. They don't stop and shut up, but they come out and they defeat the GOAT. The Patriots are going to come out. Mac Jones is going to ball out. He's going to be like, look what you're missing, Brady. Mac, he's just going to have a game. And then Belichick's going to talk a bunch of smack, even though Belichick will probably just be like, on to the next game. But I just think that them being in Gillette, Brady returning, not saying that Brady's not going to have a good fantasy game, but I just think that the Patriots are going to win that game somehow. And if they do, we'll come back to this next week, and I'll be like, I told you so. Also, my second bold prediction is Derrick Henry is going to go over 200 yards. And you're going to say, why is that a bold prediction? Like, Derrick Henry is a beast and he's a monster. But Derrick Henry has only had 2 good games in the first 3 weeks. And, obviously that's not bad. And, he had a phenomenal week 2, putting up 47.7 points. He didn't have such a good week 1. And this week he had a very okay week. He didn't put up those types of numbers. But this week he gets to face the Jets. And that Jets defense and offense is just honestly terrible. So I can see Derrick Henry just having a different type of game and having 2 or 3 touchdowns and just balling out. That would be awesome to see, because I really need Derrick Henry to ball out, because I have him in all my leagues. So I'm relying on the big beast King Henry to go out and ball out. But I bold prediction, he's going over 200 yards. My last bold prediction for week 4 is the Eagles upset the Chiefs and the Chiefs fall to 1-3. The Eagles had a very bad loss on Monday night versus the Dallas Cowboys. And then now they get to go in and face Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes after Patrick Mahomes lost. And, I think Jalen Hurts is ready, and he's sick of it, and he's ready to show why he's one of the best quarterbacks and why he wants to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for years to come. So I'm calling it. Last year, if you remember, I said that the Washington football team was going to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers somehow, some way, and they did. And I don't know how I guessed it, but they just did. So that's how I'm feeling about this game. The Eagles are going to upset the Chiefs, and we're going to be like, dang, Tino, what you doing? How do you know that? But let's get in. Enough about bold predictions and all the things that happened last week. Let's get into this week, and let's get ready to set your lineups and the starts, the sits, the streams, the waiver wire pickups, and the top 5 flex options. But for the first one we want to talk about is the waiver wire pickups, because that's where you win your week. And like we talked about last week, you could literally pick up a guy off of the waiver wire that could help you put up 20 plus points like Alexander Madison did. I picked him up on Saturday night in one of my leagues, and he definitely helped me win my week, because I only won by like 7 or 8 points, and he put up 20 plus points. So I'm going to take it all day long. But let's get to number 5. The number 5 waiver wire pickup for me this week is James Conner from the Arizona Cardinals. He gets to go up against the Jaguars this week, and he put up 18.3 points this week. And, it's one of those things that I'm talking about James Robinson too much. James Conner, he has been on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had a really good run there, and then he kind of fell off, and we really haven't seen him do too much. But him putting up those numbers this week versus the Jaguars. And, I think that he could be very more consistent. Yes, Chase Edmonds is there, and obviously you're gonna flex Chase Edmonds. And this is one of the things that if you need a flex, go out and get James Conner, because that Arizona Cardinals defense, or that Arizona Cardinals offense, is phenomenal, and they just move up and down the field. Also, another team that moves up and down the field, and if you need a flex option, and like we talked about, if you're struggling with Devonte Smith, or you're worried about your flex and you just don't know what to do, go out and get Emmanuel Sanders. He had 6 receptions. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 94 yards, and he had another touchdown this week. And Emmanuel Sanders has been one of those guys that has been very consistent, and he's had more points than Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs was somebody you drafted. I did in the 3rd round in one of my leagues, and maybe I shouldn't have drafted him that high. Maybe I should have waited on our wide receiver. But Emmanuel Sanders is somebody that is getting targets, and as hot as Josh Allen has been throwing the ball the last few weeks, I think that is only going to be continuing. And you just need to make sure, like we talked about, if you need wide receiver help, definitely go out and get Emmanuel Sanders. My number 3 waiver wire pickup this week is the Titans defense. And you're saying a defense? Why a defense? We always talk about it. You need to stream defenses. And to be honest, I wish you could just pick like a team. I wish you could pick like I want to draft the Jets. So every time whoever the Jets face, what you get the points for what their defense gets. That would be interesting. But you always need to stream defenses and find the good matchups. And like we talked about with Derrick Henry, the Titans have a very good matchup this week versus the Jets. Zach Wilson likes to throw touchdowns up and down. He doesn't know how to throw it to the Jets. He throws it to the other team. So I definitely think the Titans can benefit. So if you need a defense, go pick up the Titans. Number 2 waiver wire pickup this week, I talked about him a second ago, Alexander Madison. He put up 23.1 points this week versus the Seattle Seahawks. And Dalvin Cook's injury history and all of his things that he's been through, he has always seemed to be hurt and missing games. So especially if you do have Dalvin Cook, you need to make sure you have Madison on your team, because like me, I snuck him up and I picked him up, and now the guy that has Dalvin Cook doesn't know what to do because he drafted Dalvin Cook in the 1st round and he doesn't have Alexander Madison. And that's why, in my opinion, you always need to make sure you have your backups for guys that have injury history. And speaking of injury history, we talked about Christian McCaffrey. He is out for at least 6 weeks. There will probably not be an IR stint, which is good, but he's going to miss some time with that hamstring injury. And we always talk about the hamstring injuries being lingering and just being one of those things that you never know what could happen. So we just talked about Alexander Madison. You need to go pick up Christian McCaffrey's backup. He's my number 1 waiver wire pickup this week. It's Chuba Hubbard. Go pick him up now. I talked about it in my fantasy headlines. Go pick him up, especially if you're a Christian McCaffrey owner, because if you don't get him, you're going to be struggling at running backs, and it's just one of those things. Injuries can happen to anybody, and you just need to make sure you have the backup, because you just never know. Like with Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, you need to have if you have DeAndre Swift, you need to have Jamal Williams, it's just like that. You got to have the backups because you just never know. And those are my top 5 waiver wire pickups for week 4. Now, let's get into the top 5 flex options for week 4, that if you are able to get these guys in the waiver wire, or maybe there's some waiver wire leftovers, but just if there is some guys that I already told you to pick up that should be on your teams that you need to put in your flex option this week. So, let's get started. My number 5 flex option is Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers had 18.4 points, 9 receptions, and 94 yards this week. He had a phenomenal game, and now Mac Jones gets to go up against Tom Brady on Sunday night, and yeah, that game is going to be really good, and I think, to be honest, that game could possibly be fantasy gold. So I would definitely start Jacoby Myers versus the Bucs this week, because the Patriots might be down, and even if they aren't, Jacoby Myers is somebody that Mac Jones has been looking forward to. So go pick up Jacoby Myers and start him in your lineup. Number 4, Emmanuel Sanders. I just told you to pick him up and put him in your flex, because versus that Texans defense, and the Texans secondary is awful. Emmanuel Sanders should get better options, and he's going to get the same type of opportunities, and with Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs, and Josh Allen just has so many weapons, it's ridiculous. Josh Allen is just awesome, so make sure you have Emmanuel Sanders in your lineup and your flex this week. Number 3, Cordell Patterson. versus Cordell Patterson. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Cordell Patterson has had 3 games of 10 plus points, and now he gets to go up against the Washington football team. And it's one of those things, the Washington football team hasn't been as good as we expected them to be, and maybe we gave them too high expectations this year, but Cordell Patterson has been very good this year, so I would definitely go and pick him up and start him this week in your flex. My number 2 flex, Brandon Ayuk. Welcome back to fantasy football, my man. You went out and you balled out on Sunday night. You caught a touchdown, you caught some balls, you did your thing versus the Packers. So go out and continue that versus the Seattle Seahawks and that defense that honestly hasn't been very good. And yes, they just, they're not very good, and they're not the 12th men anymore, and they're not what they used to be. So Brandon Ayuk, put him in your flex this week and feel good. Chuba Hubbard, I just told you, number 1 waiver wire pickup, and depending on what you have at running back, maybe he will be your RB2, but if you are deep at running back, still put Chuba in your flex and feel good, because versus the Cowboys, Miles Sanders didn't have a very good game, and the Eagles didn't have a very good game at all, but the Cardinals the Panthers are a better team than what the Eagles did this week, and so I just think it's going to be a better game for the Carolina Panthers. So pick up Chuba Herbert and put him in your lineup. And now, after we talk about all the flex options, the waiver wire pickups, let's get into the starts, sits, and streams for week 4, because that's one of the best things to do every week is the starts and sits of the week, because that's where you get all the information from your boy Tino that just helps you set your lineup. So let's get started. The quarterbacks that you need to start this week: Ryan Tannehill versus the Jets. We're always going to pick on the Jets, and the Jets defense is just awful. Joe Burrow versus the Jaguars. The Joe Burrow versus the Jaguars on Thursday Night Football is going to be a really good game, in my opinion. I think Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow are going to show why they were the top overall picks in their represented drafts, and I think that's just going to be a really good game. So start Ryan Tannehill and Joe Burrow. I talked about these two a little bit earlier about having their backups, Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift versus the Bears, and Jonathan Taylor versus Fins up the Dolphins. You saw what Kareem Hunt did last week versus that Bears, and I think DeAndre Swift is going to have that same type of game. So put him in your lineup and feel good. I talked about Jonathan Taylor a little bit ago. I think he is definitely going to have that first touchdown this week versus that Dolphins defense, and Jonathan Taylor needs to prove on why he was a first or second round pick, because I'm starting to worry, and I don't want to hit that panic button. We don't want to hit that panic button on Jonathan Taylor just yet. Henry Ruggs through the third. He has been very good, and this past week he had a really good game. And so start him this week versus the Chargers, because it looks like Derek Carr is looking his way, and feel good about it, because Henry Ruggs is one of the best wide receivers. He's just very underrated in my opinion. Also, the other wide receiver that you need to start is Michael Pittman Jr. The Dolphins, Fins up. The Colts face the Dolphins, and I talked about Jonathan Taylor getting in the end zone. I definitely see Michael Pittman Jr. getting in the end zone too. The tight ends that you need to start last week, humble brag, Dalton Schultz. I said it. You needed to start the Cowboys tight ends. Just so happened Dalton Schultz did it. And so this week I'm going to tell you to start Logan Thomas versus the Falcons. That Falcons defense is awful, and I definitely think this is one game that could be very high scoring, just because two defenses that aren't as very good. Yes, Matt Ryan. I almost said Matthew Stafford. Matt Ryan likes to throw interceptions for some reason, and it gives me so much anxiety. And if Washington football team gets short field, Logan Thomas is one of the best tight ends in the NFL, and he is very underrated. But he is one of those guys that can get a touchdown. And from tight ends, that's sometimes all we need. Gerald Everett from the Seattle Seahawks versus the San Francisco 49ers. Everett has been very good and very consistent this year with dangerous Russ Wilson. He's been doing good, so definitely start him versus the 49ers this week. My defense to start this week, I told you to pick them up. It's the Tennessee Titans versus Zach Wilson and the Jets. I can't trust anybody on the Jets. I trust Corey Davis a little bit, but I just don't like Zach Wilson throwing the ball, and he always seems to throw interceptions. So the Denver Broncos in some leagues put up 36 points, depending on how your league works and stuff like that. But just pick on the Jets, and whoever the Jets whoever the Jets face, pick up their defense. So this week, pick up the Titans. And there's my starts for week 4. But let's talk about the guys that you need to sit this week because they got bad matchups. We just don't want you to cost them your weeks because I really think a lot of these guys are going to be on the disappointments for week 4. And yeah, Teddy Bridgewater versus the Ravens. Teddy Bridgewater has been very good, but this past week we thought he was going to do a lot better, and he didn't. I don't know if it was Devonta Williams getting more touches. I don't know if it was Melvin Gordon. I don't know what it was, but Teddy Bridgewater didn't put up the points that we expected, and now he gets to go face the Ravens, and not that the Ravens defense is as good as they used to be, but they are still very good, and there are better options out there. Like I said, Joe Burrow versus the Jags, Ryan Tannehill versus the Jets. So go sit Teddy Bridgewater, not drop him, just sit him this week versus the Ravens. Kirk Cousins versus the Browns. Did we see what the Browns did to Justin Fields on Sunday? They made Justin Fields look like a little kid on Christmas, running around looking for presents, and he had a chicken with his head cut off. It was just awful. So don't start Kirk Cousins this week versus the Browns. I would definitely still start Alexander Madison or Dalvin Cook, depending on what the injury list looks like this week. Justin Jefferson, you're obviously not going to sit, but just do not start Kirk Cousins because I just don't think it's going to be a great game from him. And maybe I'll be wrong, but I just don't know if I can trust it after what the Browns did last week. Mike Davis versus the Washington football team and Mark Ingram versus the Bills. That Bills defense has been very good this year, and I just don't want to deal with that Bills run defense. So sit Mark Ingram. Mike Davis versus the Washington football team. He is not, Mike Davis has been one of those guys. Cordell Patterson has been in the backfield a lot more, and he's getting a lot more receptions than honestly I thought he would in the first 3 weeks. So just stay away from Mike Davis, and there are better options this week, even if you have to start Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines is one of those guys, especially in PPR leagues, that is very good. The 2 wide receivers, or 3 wide receivers, or wide receivers in general, because I'm going to tell you a team's wide receivers to sit. Devonte Smith versus the Chiefs. I talked about him a little bit earlier. I want to see it from him first, and I just want to see him be able to do the good things and prove that he can be a top receiver. And not that, like we talked about, the Chiefs' defense has been awful, but I just don't know what to do with Jalen Hurts. And like I said, you're not going to give up on Jalen Hurts yet, but I don't know what to do, and I don't want to keep putting him in my lineup and have anxiety about it. And I just want to have guys I'm confident in. The other receivers that you need to sit this week are the Giants. The Giants receivers, we talked about them a little bit ago in the injuries. They all got hurt. Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Kenny Golladay have been hurt throughout the whole season. Kenny Golladay especially has had lingering injuries, and we don't know what's going to happen with these hamstrings in this upcoming week. And I just don't know if I can start the Giants receivers. So sit them versus the Saints this week because the Saints defense was really good last week. So we might not know what Saints team shows up, but we know what Giants team is going to show up. So sit the Giants. Tyler Conklin, he last week had a really good game. Everybody was feeling good. He was on the hashtag that helps nobody, no one, that helps no one. But he gets a matchup versus the Browns this week. And again, we saw what the Browns did to the Chicago Bears this past week. So I don't know if I could start him. And there are better tight ends out there this week, like we talked about with Logan Thomas and Gerald Everett. They are better guys out there. Max Williams versus the Rams. Max Williams is a guy I really like from the Arizona Cardinals. He's the tight end. But last week he only had 4 points. And to be honest, Max Williams is one guy I would just want to start on like a bye week. And bye weeks are going to start coming up soon. And we're going to have to start figuring that out. So I just don't know if I can trust him this week versus the Rams. So I would sit him. But as the weeks go on, the Arizona Cardinals offense is just only going to get better, and Kyler Murray is going to have better games. So Max Williams, keep on your bench, but don't start him this week versus the Rams. Now, the defense that you need to sit, it's the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos these past 3 weeks have had really good matchups, and they're 3-0. They have faced the Giants, the Jets, and the Jaguars. They had 3 really good matchups, and they took advantage of that. But this week, they get to go play a real offense in the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Miller, or not Lamar Miller, oh my God, Lamar Jackson, Hollywood Brown. They got all these guys, Mark Andrews, and I just don't know if I want to trust the Broncos defense versus the Baltimore Ravens offense. The Baltimore Ravens offense is deadly, especially Lamar Miller, because he is so deadly as a running back or a quarterback. He could probably play receiver if he could throw it far enough and then run fast enough. But I just don't trust the Broncos defense this week. But thank you, Broncos defense, for helping me out in one of my leagues and getting me to 2-1. I'll take that for 2 out of 3 weeks from a defense all day long. But let's get into the streams of the week and guys that you can stream this week for guys that you're going to have to sit, like Teddy Bridgewater, Kirk Cousins, Devonte Smith, Max Williams, the Broncos defense. So my first stream of the week, it's Baker Mayfield versus the Vikings. The Vikings defense is not as good as it once was, and Baker Mayfield did really good versus the Chicago Bears defense, and I think he's only going to do better versus the Minnesota Vikings defense. So start Baker Mayfield this week. My other stream for the week, this one might be a little surprising, but it's Taylor Heinicke from the Washington football team. We talked about Logan Thomas, and Taylor Heinicke has had a pretty good few games this season, and now he gets to go up against that Falcons defense that is absolutely garbage. So in my opinion, I would definitely go start Taylor Heinicke this week versus that awful Falcons defense. My two running backs that you need to start, or you can stream, you can just listen to me with these two. Cordell Patterson versus the Washington football team. We talked about Cordell. He's been getting a lot of receptions, and he's been doing a lot in the passing game and in the rushing game. So I feel like you can stream him and start him this week, especially versus that Washington football team's defense that hasn't been as good as we expected. We talked about this guy, Chuba Herbert. I told you to flex him, stream him, start him, pick him up. Just put this guy in your lineup because he's going to get the same production as Christian McCaffrey did, and I just think this is going to be a better game for the Panthers than it was for the Eagles last week versus the Cowboys defense. The other running back that you can stream this week, it's Jamal Williams versus the Bears. My Chicago Bears, I love my Bears, but I got to pick on them because their run defense just has not been very good, and we saw what Kareem Hunt did last week, and that's exactly what Jamal Williams is going to do. Maybe it's DeAndre Swift. I told you to start DeAndre Swift. So start the Lions running backs versus the Bears because I feel like both of them are going to eat the same way that Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt did last week. I love my Bears, but I just got to be real, and they're just not the monsters of the midway what they once were and what they were in 2018, as much as I hate to say that. The other receiver, the one receiver that you can stream this week is Jalen Waddle versus the Colts. Jalen Waddle put up 17 points last week, and I think he's going to do a lot better this week versus the Colts, and I think that him and Jacoby have a very good rapport, and I think that Jalen is going to come out and he's going to break out. So start Jalen Waddle, or stream Jalen Waddle this week. Start him, put him in your flex. Just feel good about Jalen because he's been doing great things. We talked about this guy on Monday night, Zach Ertz. Pick Zach Ertz up if you can't get an Alexander Madison, a Chuba Herbert, a Emmanuel Sanders. Go out and pick up Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz had a really good game on Monday night, and like I said earlier, maybe Zach Ertz is back to fantasy football, but we always talk about it. Tight ends are so hard to come by. So versus the Chiefs defense this week that is giving up a lot of points to offensive players like we talked about, Zach Ertz is a great opportunity in a tight end spot. The other tight end this week that you can start is Dawson Knox. He's had 39 points not 39 points. I'm sorry. He's had 30 plus receptions and yards and everything this week. And like we talked about, we always need a tight end, and we always need that guy that we can stream. So Dawson Knox is a really good tight end that you can stream. And Josh Allen, yes, he's got too many mouths to feed, but he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So stream Dawson Knox this week. Now, the defense I'm telling you to stream, and this one might be a little surprising, but if you really watch football this year, it's not surprising. It's the Green Bay Packers versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are one of those teams that, Najee Harris is going to be great with the receptions and the yards and everything, but Ben Roethlisberger is not what Ben Roethlisberger once was. He can't get out of the pocket. He can't do what he once did. And it really bothers me that they are still sticking with him. As much as we love Ben Roethlisberger, he's just ruining his name and his career at this point. So I think the Packers defense will definitely get some sacks. They'll probably get a pick six. They'll get some turnovers. So start the Packers defense and stream them this week, because we always talk about streaming defenses, and that's one defense that you can put in your lineup and feel good about. But Now that we went through all the streams, let's talk about the 3 games that are going to be fantasy gold for week 4, and you need to start everybody in their games. The Cardinals versus the Rams. I thought the Buccaneers and Rams were going to be a close game, and I thought it was going to be an absolute defensive game, but it was not at all. It was an absolute shootout. At least for the Rams it was. Tom Brady didn't look too good, but I'm sure Brady's going to want some revenge in that return game on Monday night. But Cardinals and Rams, start Murray, Hopkins hopefully he plays, Chase Edmonds, James Conner, just start all of them. Especially maybe Christian Kirk in that game is a deep sleeper if you need a receiver. Also, the Rams, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Robbie Woods, all of them. Start them all. KC versus the Eagles. This is a game, I talked about it. Jalen Hurts didn't have a very good performance, and that Chiefs defense is giving up a lot of points to offensive players in fantasy football this year. 37.1 point games per game to offensive players on other teams. So that Chiefs-Eagles game is going to be an absolute shootout. Patrick Mahomes is going to do his thing versus that Eagles defense, just like Dak Prescott did, even though Dak Prescott didn't have a great game. Zeke stole 2 of his touchdowns, which was okay with me because it helped me win my league, or my week this week, and I'll take it all day long. But start all your Chiefs and all your Eagles. The last game that's going to be fantasy gold is the Monday Nighter. It's the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football on ESPN. You need to start everybody. Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, everybody in that game. You need to start Derek Carr, Henry Ruggs, Peyton Barber was a guy that went off this week that we didn't really talk about too much. But if you need a running back, go pick him up because he might be another flex option that you can rely on. And those are my 3 games that are going to be absolute fantasy gold this week. And you need to start them and just feel good that they're going to put up fantasy points. And you're going to feel good at the end of the week. For the last segment before we go, and your boy Tino leaves you until next Tuesday when we recap week 4 and get you ready for week 5. It's my 3 guarantees of week 4. The return game is going to be memorable. Tom Brady, especially this week, he's coming off of one of his worst games of his career versus the Rams. I wouldn't say like awful, but he put up good fantasy numbers, but the Buccaneers looked awful. So I think Brady, I talked about the Patriots going out and winning that game, and that's why it could be memorable. We could see the biggest upset, and we could see Belichick beat Brady and be like, that is why you need me. But again, Brady doesn't need Belichick because Brady won the Super Bowl last year. But either way, that game is going to be memorable. So make sure that you start everybody in that game. And if you're not in fantasy football, watch it either way because that game is going to be awesome. My second guarantee of the week, I talked about him in my starts. Jonathan Taylor is going to have a touchdown. He might even have 2. Hopefully 2 because I need Jonathan Taylor to have a game. But I guarantee you he's going to have a touchdown. All Titans are going to feast. I know this is an easy guarantee, but Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, hopefully A.J. Brown plays. We talked about him being hurt. He's week to week. Julio Jones is going to eat. That Titans defense is going to eat. Everybody on the Titans is going to eat. So make sure you start all your Titans and sit all your Jets. And I don't know why you'd be starting a Jet. Maybe Corey Davis, but that would be the only guy I would trust on that team right now. But those are my 3 guarantees for week 4. And I can't wait to see if I get any of them right, and hopefully I do, because if I do, I'll be in a good spot, and hopefully people that drafted these guys, and like Jonathan Taylor, hopefully he'll have this game because we need him to have a game. And like I said, my 3 guarantees of the week. And there you have it, people. For week 4, the week 3 is in the books. Week 4 is going to be awesome. I cannot even believe that we are already 4 weeks in to the fantasy football and the football season in general. When football season comes on, it seems like time flies and the winter flies. And, my opinion, I dislike cold weather a lot, but I love fantasy football, and that's one of the best things about the winter, in my opinion, and that's the one thing that gets me through it. So I hope all this information helps you. I hope all of you listen. I hope you like it. I hope that we covered everything we possibly can. So I hope everybody remember to smash that subscribe button. go and follow your boy at TinoTime1996, TinoTime10 on Instagram. Also, go check out my other channel, Tino's Time Wrestling. We have some shows coming out this week, so get excited for that. For all you wrestling community fanatics, for all you fantasy football gurus, I hope we have a good week 4. I hope everybody wins. I hope all this information helps. And until next week, when we recap week 4 and we get ready for week 5, and we'll be in October 1st. This is upcoming Friday. Can't believe we're already in October. It's 2 months until Christmas. Where did 2021 go? I'm still trying to recover from 2022. Anyway, until next week, when we get down and dirty and we talk about everything that happened in the fantasy football season, this is your boy Tino, signing out.